Matthew chapter 18, verses 1 to 4 says this. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a little child and had him stand among them. And he said, "I tell you the truth. Unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." We know from what Jesus was saying that he was using a very simple illustration to his disciples about what it is to be great and to be successful in the kingdom of heaven. As Jamie was saying, it's all about a simple childlike faith in the Father, in Jesus, and in what he's doing. What Jesus originally said there was, this is how you get into the kingdom of heaven. And it's simply this, that we have a trust in Jesus, in what he has done on the cross, on his death for us, and his shed blood, as we've been talking about this morning, and that covers our sin. And as we simply trust him, as we believe in him, so Jesus takes away our sin and we become his children. We enter into his kingdom. And the child example is a simple one of humility and trusting. It's what children are like. If they're brought up in a loving family, they are trusting and they are humble and they are looking at their parents and following them and being obedient to them. And that's the basis of becoming a follower of Jesus. But obviously, what Jesus was also saying was that that's not only how we start, but that's how we continue. That's how we go all through our lives. And however old we get in the faith, however greater understanding, however mature we get, we never move on from this simple childlike faith to do what God has called us to do, to see what Jesus is doing and to follow that. We're told in Hebrews that it is what pleases God is faith. And it's about believing that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. And faith is very simply that. God, you're there. God, I know you. I trust you. And actually, as I come to you, as I approach you, I'm going to be rewarded. I'm going to know you more. I'm going to receive your spirit. I'm going to have guidance and for my life and be able to work things out and to know your presence. And so that's what Jesus was saying in this very simple illustration. Now, the problem we often have is that although we understand what it is to be childlike, we can also still be childish in the way we behave. And the two are very different. And we start our lives as childlike and childish, but God calls us to grow into maturity. And that is about understanding who God is, growing in understanding of God, growing in understanding of the Bible, in relationships, in how we handle money and how we handle work and all things like that. And we can grow in that, and God calls us to do that. But he calls us never to move on from our childlike faith. So one of the things that I've noticed and I've chatting to people at work, this is a challenging time for many people. And we can have an attitude of, if you like, childishness, where we are saying this isn't fair. This, what's happening to me, what's going on is I'm really struggling with it. Why is this happening? It's not right. And I can understand that. And some of you and some of the people that I'm dealing with are facing really tough, difficult situations. And yet it can be like they're sort of a child who's just getting so cross. And it's the expression that came to mind was throwing the rattle out of the pram. I'm sure you've heard of it. And actually, I don't want to be judgmental in that, because you look at some people, and I've chatted to people even in our church, and some of the challenges they're facing are really tough and really difficult. In terms of long-term financial issues, being isolated, and all that. And it is easy for us to feel this is unfair. Why is this happening to me? And even when you look at other people, you think, oh, they don't seem to be having it nearly as tough as I'm having it. This isn't right. And we can get a bit, if you like, we can be a bit childish and be a bit, actually, why this isn't fair? Why is this happening? And as I said, that's understandable. And yet God is calling us not to behave in that way, but to come back to him with this simple childlike faith, to look at him and say, God, you love me. You're my Father. You know what you're doing. And I want to come and trust you. Now, we need the Holy Spirit's help. And we're talking about that. We need the Holy Spirit to help us to get to that position, because, some of these situations are really difficult. But that illustration of a child and that simple childlike faith stands true for all time. It doesn't change when the situation gets more difficult. It's not just true when everything is going well. It's true all the time. I was looking at the prophetic word of Graham Cook again this week. And we've quoted this a few times, and it opens with these words: the chaos of the world is simply the prime time of the kingdom. And it's a key statement that sort of sums up what's going on in the rest of the word, I believe. And obviously it was written before coronavirus was hit the world. And indeed, coronavirus has sent the world into chaos. But it so clearly speaks that actually God is about a work in the midst of this chaos. He knew what was coming, and he is doing something in this time. He is wanting to see his kingdom come, and he is bringing that about even in the midst of this crisis. He's doing something in this time, and some of us struggle with how it's happening. And yet all of us over the years have prayed, your kingdom come, your will be done, your kingdom come, and God is doing it. And yet, as often happens in the Bible, when God does things and it doesn't happen quite in the way we were expecting or we like, we find it difficult. But it's in those times God calls us to trust and to have that simple childlike faith. I heard this Wednesday, a church in Catford where our son and daughter go, that they are they're running an Alpha course, and I know we're considering potentially doing that. And one of the girls who's at a college has arranged for 32 of her friends from the college to start attending Alpha. And that is a stunning number of people. God is at work. It's just down the road from us. God is stirring the hearts of men and women to seek after him. The number of people that are joining in with church services like this, the number of people Googling prayer and seeking God is incredible. God is stirring up the nation, and he's about a great work. And he's calling us to get on board with that, with simple faith, even in the midst of challenging times. A few more lines from that prophetic word. It says, therefore I am calling you up and out from fear and from weakness, from your unbelief and your poverty spirit. Even as circumstances get darker in the world, the light of my face will shine with favor and blessings and miracles and resources. I feel that God is helping us here in the midst of the times that we are finding challenging, to say, look, I'm doing something here and I'm not going to abandon you. I love the world. I want to save the world. I want you to be part of what I'm doing. And yeah, you're going to be in the midst of what's going on. You're not going to be insulated from some of the challenges the world is facing, but I am with you to give you resources. I am with you to see miracles, as we've been hearing. I am here to bring blessing and favor. And so God is calling us to have that simple trust and say, yeah, God, I'm struggling. This is difficult, but actually, I trust you. I know you. I've got maturity in understanding that you are good, that you love me, that you're with me. And I'm going to trust even in the midst of this difficult situation. Now, it's right also that we try and discern in this what God is doing and follow on. And during this week, we had a discussion a number of people got together to look at what is God saying, how does it affect church, how do we adjust, what do we do on the back of this, and how do we, going forward, what do we do? And it's right that we discern what God is doing and follow him. That's how the disciples learned. They saw what Jesus was doing and they copied him and they followed him, and they saw how he prayed for the sick, they saw how he dealt with people, and they could copy that and follow that. But there are also situations where they were completely baffled. And all they had to do was simply trust. So we think of Peter and the great catch of fish. And he'd been fishing all night, the story. And he hadn't caught anything. And then Jesus said, throw your net over the other side. And Peter, being a seasoned fisherman, with all the knowledge that he had about the sea, thought, this is a complete waste of time. I know this. Logically, there's no point in me doing this. But he said, because you said it, Jesus, I'm going to do that. And of course, he had this great catch of fish. And Peter, again, a great example of walking on the water. This was not a logical, sensible, worked out decision. This was an act of simple, childlike faith that he got out of the boat and walked on the water. And God is looking for us in this time. Okay, yes, we can look and think, okay, what is God saying? What is God doing? And it's right that we do that. But actually, most of the time, and Fiola's example is simply this, is to say, God, I'm available. I'm going to trust you. What is it you've got for me? What is it you want me to do today? What is it that you're doing? And I want to get on the back of that. And if you tell me to go and speak to this person and pray for them, that's what I'm going to do. Now, it's a big step for us, a big step for me. I find that difficult. I've been trying to step out a bit more in my own work environment and actually seeing what God can do there. But God is calling us to be those that are willing to simply trust him in these times. I love a quote that Hopel shared on a WhatsApp group from Corrie ten Boom. She was imprisoned in a German prisoner of war camp, and she said this. He said, "It's never be afraid to trust an unknown future to a known God." And all God asks us is to get to know him, to know that he's good and trust us, and to trust him, such that whatever is in the future, we can trust to him and know that he is good and going to bring about something good for us. I just want to finish with a story from my own childhood. Now, it's a story about going on holiday, and I don't want to in any way equate the sort of anticipation and going on holiday to some of the challenges that many of you are facing. The two aren't at all equivalent, but it's the principle of the story that I want you to get. And each year from really when I was born, we as a family went down to the south coast to a place near Christchurch, near Bournemouth. And it was a place my dad had gone in the war. He'd been evacuated down there, and they had built a whole load of bungalows for people to live in during the war down on the south coast, sort of away from the main cities. And each of these bungalows were different, and they had been put together by fairly rickety, some of them, just with the materials they had around. And at the end of the war, when people went back to their houses, they turned this into a place to rent, people to have a holiday. And each year, my parents would book one of these. Obviously, this was before internet and knowing really, and they just booked what was available at the time. And for us, it was a great adventure. We had no idea what the accommodation would be like, what it would be, how it would be arranged. I mean, one year we had a wonderful surprise where we went down and the bedrooms were a railway carriage, and they had built the rest of the house on the front of it. And but there was a real sort of anticipation. We used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. We used to drive across to Brixton to pick up my nan. We had a tiny car. There was 7 of us. I had to sit on my nan's lap. It was really uncomfortable. The journey took 5 hours. We got there at 10. We couldn't get into the place until 2. So there was this sort of waiting around. I've never to this day understood why we had to get there so early, but we did. But the excitement, the anticipation of what was going to be there, I never doubted. I trusted my parents. I knew something good was coming, even though there was a bit of a trial beforehand. I knew something good was coming because I trusted my parents. Now, it's interesting, years later, I found that my parents' view of the whole thing was somewhat different. They had a grown-up perspective. They didn't know what they were getting either. So my mum would worry about whether the place was damp. Was it drafty? Was my nan going to be comfortable there? Was there enough cooking utensils for the week? What was the weather going to be like? Was it a bit too close to the cliff top because there wasn't any protection there? All these things were going through their mind when they were looking forward to this. And they had a grown-up view which brought worry and concern, and they were, whereas I, as a young kid, had none of these concerns. I didn't bother whether it was damp. I didn't know, didn't bother me. I didn't really care if it rained. It was just an exciting holiday. And I believe God is calling us in this time to have that childlike trust that he's doing something incredible in the earth at the moment. And he's inviting us on board with it. That as we trust, he will bring us to places and to people that we can share the good news of Jesus with. He is going to bring them to our place. Like this girl who's got these 32 people. She just happened to know them. She invited them to Alpha. Because of what's going on, they came. And, and Fiola's message of just seeing someone in a car and just wanting to pray for them. God is calling us into something incredible. He's doing something amazing. And he's asking us to trust him, asking us to have that simple, childlike trust so that we may follow on with what he's doing and come to get alongside and to follow him. It's not always easy, but he is calling us to that simple, childlike faith.